A mansion worth $40 million is taxed like an empty field, and the owner did that on purpose. Felix found the property tax bill sitting on the porch, and it was $900 a year. That land has a 50-room house on it, a private runway, and a garage full of cars. Nobody drives. The county sees none of that because on paper, that estate is a working farm. A few goats grazing near the pool is technically, legally, a farm. This one law can cut a tax bill by 90%, and it has existed for over 100 years. It was written to protect small farmers, and the wealthiest landowners in the country read it first. Felix is about to show exactly how this works, and why it was never built for people like him. One tiny house, one massive ranch, and the same tax code treating them like polar opposites. This is the grazing land loophole, and Felix is about to break it wide open. Felix owns a small house on a small lot, nothing fancy, just a home. Every year, an envelope arrives, and every year the number inside gets bigger. The county says his home is worth more this year, so he has to pay more, even though nothing changed. So Felix does what everyone tells him to do. He goes to fight it. He appeals the assessment, fills out every form, and waits 3 months for an answer. Denied, the value stands, and the bill stays exactly where it was. Felix tries the next obvious move, cut spending somewhere else to cover the gap. It barely moves the needle because the tax bill was never about his spending. Felix tries refinancing the mortgage to lower the monthly payment, but the tax bill is separate and keeps climbing anyway. He looks into moving to a cheaper county, but selling now would mean losing what little equity he has built. Felix feels stuck, doing everything a responsible homeowner is told to do, and still losing ground every year. Then Felix sees a flyer at the feed store, 90% off property tax, agricultural use only. The idea is simple. Land used for farming is taxed on what it produces, not on what it could sell for. A field growing hay might be assessed at a few $100s an acre instead of tens of thousands. Felix runs home ready to sign his tiny backyard up for the same deal. Then he reads the fine print. Most states require a minimum number of acres to even qualify. His backyard is 1/10 of an acre. The law was written for people with land to spare. This is the trap. The loophole exists, but it was never sized for people who only own a little. Meanwhile, across town, a landowner with 2,000 acres files the exact same paperwork. His tax bill drops from $80,000 to under $1,000, instantly, legally. He does not farm it himself. He leases a corner of it to a rancher for almost nothing. The law does not ask why he owns the land, only whether cows are standing on it. Felix decides if size is the barrier, then Felix is going to get bigger. The trick worked at scale, so now Felix has to find out how far that scale can go. Before the story picks back up, one quick reminder. The tricks in this video can change, so subscribing means never missing the next one. Now back to the ranch. Felix scrapes together savings and buys 10 cheap acres 2 hours outside the city. He hauls in 3 goats because 3 is the minimum the county requires. He files the paperwork himself, agricultural exemption, application submitted. The next bill arrives and it is 90% smaller. For one season, it works exactly like it did for the big landowner. Then, a county assessor's truck pulls up unannounced. The assessor asks for proof, receipts, feed records, actual farm income. Felix has 3 goats and no records, and the exemption is suddenly at risk. Counties have tightened the rules for small owners. More inspections, more proof, more hoops. The rich landowner never gets this visit. His lawyer already filed everything the county wants. Felix starts reading everything he can find about how the big estates actually stay protected. There is a second, stronger tool, a conservation easement, giving up development rights forever. In exchange for promising never to build on the land, the owner gets a massive tax deduction. The land was never going to be built on anyway, but the deduction still counts. There is a third tool too, wildlife management valuation, letting land qualify just by staying untouched habitat. No goats required, no farming required, just paperwork. Proving nature is allowed to exist there. Felix realizes the real trick was never farming. It was always paperwork and lawyers. He calls a land use consultant, someone who does this stacking for a living. The consultant explains that big estates layer 3 or 4 exemptions on the same property at once. The consultant shows Felix a real case, a 2,000-acre estate with 4 separate exemptions stacked on record. On paper, 90% of that estate produces hay, timber, or wildlife habitat, and none of it needs to be true in practice. Felix asks how often the county actually verifies any of it, and the consultant just smiles. Most audits target small owners first, because chasing one small file is easier than untangling a stack of large ones. Agricultural use covers the pastures, conservation covers the untouched acres, wildlife covers the rest. Every single acre ends up covered by something, and none of it is taxed at full value. Felix decides 3 goats was never going to be enough. He needs to build this properly. He hires the consultant, forms a small LLC, and buys the neighboring parcel. He files the conservation easement on the back half, the part he never planned to use anyway. The deduction alone wipes out most of his income tax for the year. On the wooded section, he adds a wildlife management plan, feeders, and a small pond for deer. That section qualifies for its own separate valuation, stacked on top of everything else. The next tax bill for his entire property comes in at $412. A neighbor with a single small house down the road pays $9,000 for a tenth of the land. The system did not break any rule to make this happen. It followed every single one perfectly. Felix stops thinking small. If this works on one property, it works on 10. This is the exact moment the loophole stops being smart and starts becoming absurd. Felix buys a second ranch, then a third, each one bigger than the last. On one ranch, he builds a mansion, then hides it behind a barn-shaped facade. A hay shed on paper is a helipad in reality. Felix hires a wildlife biologist just to sign off on the paperwork. Ranch 2, $300 in tax. Ranch 3, $190. He forms a separate LLC for every property because the paperwork favors it. The same 12 goats get trucked between properties right before every inspection. Inspectors see cows on every property on the exact day they show up. Ranch 4 gets a vineyard because grapevines qualify too. Ranch 5 just needs a few beehives, and beehives count as agriculture in some states. 6 beehives protect 800 acres from full taxation. A local reporter starts asking questions about who really owns these ranches. Every LLC name is different, so no single search connects them. Felix hires an actual part-time rancher, just to make every property look legitimate. Paying that rancher costs less in a year than 1 month of full property tax would. By Ranch 7, Felix is not managing land anymore. He is managing loopholes. A think tank publishes a report calling this exact pattern a multi-billion-dollar national trend. A state lawmaker proposes closing the loophole. Lobbyists from the Farm Bureau show up the very next day. The bill dies quietly in committee because real small farmers rely on the same exemption too. The loophole survives because untangling it would hurt the small farmers it was built to protect. Ranch 8, Ranch 9, Ranch 10, each one another shell, another exemption, another zero added. Across 10 ranches, Felix now controls 12,000 acres. His combined property tax bill for all of it is under $3,000 a year. A single studio apartment 2 hours away pays more than that in a single month. The school district that serves that apartment relies on property tax revenue to operate. When ranches pay almost nothing, that gap does not disappear. It moves to someone else's bill. Felix barely notices because he is already looking at Ranch 11. This ranch comes with a private airstrip disguised as a long dirt access road. Felix closes on Ranch 11 before lunch. 12 ranches, 3 states, 1 spreadsheet. Keeping it all straight. One ranch technically raises alpacas because alpacas also count as livestock. 2 alpacas save more money per year than most people make in a month. Felix names one alpaca deduction, just to remember which ranch it belongs to. The pattern repeats state after state, county after county, silently, legally, everywhere. Researchers estimate billions in property value nationwide gets shielded this exact way. Felix is not the exception here. Felix is just paying attention. Felix adds a small vineyard tasting room, technically for agritourism, technically still exempt. A private chef gets hired under the same LLC that files the wildlife paperwork. One ranch's barn doubles as a home theater, wired for surround sound behind the hay bale walls. A financial magazine runs a feature calling this exact loophole one of the most underused tools in American real estate. Felix frames the article and hangs it in an office that is, on paper, farm storage. Applications for the same exemption spike statewide the following season. One ranch gets an emu because emus also count as livestock in a few states. One emu, 400 acres, 92% off the bill. Felix stops keeping a normal calendar. Everything is now measured in tax cycles. At his ranch summit, Felix hosts a dinner for other owners doing the exact same thing. They compare notes like it is a hobby. Whose animal saved the most money this year? Ranch 13 arrives with its exemption pre-approved before Felix even signs the deed. Felix now owns more land than some entire small towns. His total tax bill across everything is smaller than one teacher's monthly rent. None of this required breaking a single law. That is the part that should unsettle you. Felix keeps going because nothing in the system has told him to stop. 14 ranches, 15. The number stops mattering after a while. Felix's accountant sends one line: total property tax liability this year, negligible. Somewhere, a county budget meeting is discussing why the school roof cannot be fixed this year. Felix does not attend that meeting. Felix is not required to. The gap between what Felix could pay and what Felix actually pays keeps widening. This is not a glitch in the system, Felix realizes. This is the system working exactly as designed. And that realization is exactly where this story stops being funny. Every ranch Felix built pulled real money out of a real county budget somewhere. That money would have paid a teacher, a firefighter, or fixed a road. Instead, it sat quietly inside a barn that was never really a barn. The family renting a small apartment down the road cannot buy 10 acres to opt in. The loophole was never hidden. It just requires money most people will never have. That is not an accident. That is the actual design. Somewhere right now, someone watching this is paying full price for a small house on a small lot. That is not a personal failure. That is a math problem built before that person was born. The people who wrote this law a century ago are not the ones using it today. The rules did not change. The players did. Felix is not a villain in this story. Felix just found the door everyone else forgot existed. The real question is not why Felix walked through it. The real question is why the door is only that wide. Wide enough for 10 acres, closed for 1/10 of one. This video will not tell anyone to go buy 10 acres and 3 goats. Most people cannot afford the entry price, and that is exactly the point being made here. Systems built around minimum thresholds always end up protecting whoever already has the most. That pattern repeats far beyond property tax once someone starts looking for it. Felix did not break the system. Felix just read the manual nobody else bothered to open. Most people do not have the time, the lawyer, or the 10 acres to open it either. That is the actual gap between the people who plan around the system and the people who just pay it. Nobody is coming to close this loophole because the people with the power to close it are the ones using it. Understanding how this works will not fix it, but it changes what someone is allowed to assume. The bill in the mailbox is not neutral. It was written by someone, for someone. A single mother down the road works 2 jobs and still pays full assessed value on her half acre. She has never heard the words agricultural exemption, and no one has ever explained them to her. That is not because the rule is secret, it is because reaching it costs more than most people will ever have spare. The system does not need to hide the door, it only needs to make sure most people never reach it. Felix looks straight ahead, past the fence, past the cameras, directly at whoever is watching. The system was never hiding this from anyone, it just bet correctly that nobody would go looking. That bet is getting harder to win every time someone actually reads the fine print. Felix does not need anyone to feel bad about this. Felix needs them to stop being surprised by it. Being surprised is expensive, being informed is the only thing that is actually free here. Every dollar Felix kept is a dollar that had to be justified somewhere else on someone else's bill. This is not a story about a clever raccoon. It is a story about who gets to write the rules of the game. Felix just happened to notice the rules were never written with him in mind either, until he made them fit. Most people never get the chance to make the rules fit. They only get the bill that assumes they will not. That assumption is the actual product being sold here. Not the land, not the goats, the assumption. Felix turns away from the ranch and walks back toward the small house where this all started. The porch light is still on. The same envelope is still waiting on the same steps. Felix picks it up and for the first time does not open it with fear. The number inside has not changed, but what Felix understands about that number has. That number was never a fact of nature. It was always a choice someone else made first. Somebody chose who the fields would protect, long before Felix or anyone watching this was born. Felix folds the envelope, sets it down, and looks out at the fence line one last time. Somewhere past that fence, 12 ranches sit quiet, taxed like they produce almost nothing at all. Somebody built that field to work exactly like this. And it is still working.